In the vast expanse of the Milky Way, where countless civilizations had risen and fallen, humanity had finally stumbled its way onto the galactic stage. And boy, oh boy, were we making an impression. Not necessarily a good one, mind you, but an impression nonetheless. You see, humans had quickly earned themselves a rather colorful reputation among the various alien species. Though we were known as Deathworlders, hailing from a planet so inhospitable that most other sentient beings couldn't last 5 minutes without their environmental suits malfunctioning, their tentacles wilting, or their gelatinous bodies evaporating into a puddle of goo. But that's not even the best part. Oh no, what really threw our extraterrestrial neighbors for a loop was our inexplicable penchant for what they termed recreational near-death experiences. Skydiving, bungee jumping, whitewater rafting. To the rest of the galaxy, these were less extreme sports and more symptoms of a severe mental disorder. And so, dear reader, let me regale you with the tale of how one human's hold my beer moment left an indelible mark on galactic history. A story that would be told and retold in alien bars across the cosmos, each retelling more exaggerated than the last, until it reached truly mythical proportions. Our protagonist, or perhaps antagonist, depending on your perspective, was one Derek Danger Davidson. Now, Derek wasn't the brightest bulb in the box, but what he lacked in common sense, he more than made up for in misplaced confidence and an uncanny ability to survive situations that would make even the toughest Krexthar warrior soil their exoskeleton. It all began on a balmy evening at the rusty Airlock, an interspecies dive bar on the fringes of known space. The bar was a melting pot of cultures, species, and questionable life choices. Neon signs in a dozen different languages flickered, promising everything from best methane cocktails this side of the Horsehead Nebula to karaoke night, sing, or be spaced. Derek sauntered in, his gait a curious mix of swagger and stumble that only a human 3 sheets to the wind could achieve. He was wearing what he fondly referred to as his lucky shirt, a garish Hawaiian number adorned with flamingos wielding lightsabers. It was a sight that made several patrons' optical organs twitch involuntarily. As he made his way to the bar, a hush fell over the crowd, not out of respect, mind you, but more out of a morbid curiosity. It was the same kind of silence that descends when you see a shuttle crash in slow motion. You know you should look away, but you just can't help yourself. "Bartender," Derek called out, his voice carrying the unmistakable slur of someone who had started pre-gaming well before arriving at the actual gaming venue. "Give me your strongest, whatever won't dissolve my insides." The bartender, a Zorbaxian with 4 arms and an expression that suggested they had seen it all and wished they hadn't, merely sighed. They reached under the counter with 2 of their arms, while the other 2 were already mixing what looked suspiciously like industrial-grade coolant with a splash of neon food coloring. As Derek waited for his drink, he cast his bleary gaze around the bar. That's when he spotted them, a group of Galactic Federation officers, sitting in a corner booth, nursing drinks that glowed an ominous shade of purple. Now, normally, even in his inebriated state, Derek might have had the good sense to leave well enough alone. But tonight, fueled by liquid courage and a lifetime of bad decisions, he decided that what this situation really needed was his unique brand of diplomacy. Grabbing his drink, which was now smoking slightly, and had started to eat through the glass, Derek wobbled his way over to the officer's table. The aliens watched his approach with a mixture of fascination and horror, like witnessing a slow-motion train wreck involving clowns and fireworks. "Evening, gentlemen," Derek announced, completely oblivious to the fact that at least 2 of the beings at the table were neither gentle nor men. "Lovely night for a drink, ain't it?" The officers exchanged glances, their antennae twitching in what might have been annoyance or indigestion. It was hard to tell with these xenotypes. The apparent leader of the group, a tall, willowy creature with iridescent scales and eyes that seemed to be looking in 3 different directions at once, spoke up. "Human," it said, its voice a curious blend of wind chimes and a rusty garbage disposal. "Your kind is not welcome here. This sector is off-limits to Deathworlders." Derek blinked slowly, processing this information at the speed of a particularly dim-witted sloth. Then he did what any self-respecting human would do in this situation. He completely ignored the warning and plonked himself down at their table. "Off-limits, you say?" Derek grinned, revealing teeth that gleamed unnaturally white in the bar's dim lighting. "Well, ain't that just the berries? You know where I come from. Off-limits is just another way of saying challenge accepted." The aliens recoiled, their sensory appendages curling in disgust at the waves of alcohol fumes emanating from Derek's general direction. The leader's scales shifted from a pearlescent blue to a warning red, a clear sign that diplomacy was rapidly going out the airlock. "You misunderstand human," the alien hissed, its patience wearing thinner than the ozone layer over a CFC factory. "This is not a game. Your presence here violates no less than 17 intergalactic treaties, 3 trade embargoes, and 1 particularly strict noise ordinance." Derek nodded sagely, or at least as sagely as one can nod while trying to focus on a being whose head seemed to be in 3 places at once. "Ha ha ha ha," he mumbled, clearly not listening to a word. "Say you fellas ever try a human drinking game. It's called Never Have I Ever, real hooter at parties." The aliens exchanged glances again, this time with the unmistakable look of beings who were seriously reconsidering their career choices. The leader's scales had now progressed to a shade of red usually reserved for supergent stars about to go nova. "We have no interest in your primitive rituals," it snapped, mandibles clicking in agitation. "Remove yourself from our presence immediately or we will be forced to take corrective action." Now, dear reader, this is the point where any sensible being would apologize profusely, back away slowly, and perhaps consider a change of name and species. But Derek Danger Davidson was many things. Sensible was not one of them. Instead, he leaned in closer, his breath now capable of stripping paint at 20 paces. "Corrective action, eh? Sounds kinky. But listen, space boys, I've got a proposition for ya. How about a little wager?" The aliens' curiosity, despite their better judgment, was piqued. It was like watching a cosmic car crash, horrifying yet impossible to look away from. "The what kind of wager?" the leader asked cautiously, its scales now cycling through colors faster than a malfunctioning disco ball. Derek's grin widened to proportions that would make a Cheshire cat feel inadequate. "Simple. If I can do something that impresses you lot, something so crazy, so death-defying that even you have to admit it's badass, then you gotta let humans hang out in this sector. Deal." The alien leader conferred briefly with its companions, a series of clicks, whistles, and what sounded suspiciously like stifled laughter passing between them. Finally, it turned back to Derek. "Very well, human. We accept your terms. But be warned, we have witnessed the birth and death of the stars, the collision of galaxies, the very fabric of space-time being bent to the will of ancient, unknowable beings. We are not easily impressed." Derek nodded, his eyes gleaming with the special kind of madness that only comes from a combination of too much alcohol and not enough common sense. "Challenge accepted, squiddies. Now, who's got a spacesuit I can borrow?" What followed next was a sequence of events so monumentally stupid, so breathtakingly reckless, that it would go down in galactic history as either the greatest feat of human audacity or the most spectacular example of evolutionary failure, possibly both. Derek, having procured a spacesuit from a very confused Arcturian tourist, who would later swear off all intoxicating substances and become a monk, made his way to the bar's airlock. A crowd had gathered, drawn by the irresistible allure of potential disaster. "All right, folks," Derek announced, his voice slightly muffled by the helmet. "Watch and learn as I, Derek Danger Davidson, perform the greatest feat of Deathworld daring do this side of the Crab Nebula." With that, he hit the airlock release, launching himself into the inky void of space. The assembled aliens watched in horror and fascination as Derek tumbled through the vacuum, illuminated by the harsh light of the system's binary stars. For a moment it seemed as though Derek's bravado had finally outpaced his luck. But then, just as the aliens were debating whether they'd be held responsible for this obvious act of suicide, something extraordinary happened. Derek, using the suit's maneuvering thrusters with all the grace of a drunken rhinoceros on rocket skates, propelled himself towards a nearby asteroid field. The field was notorious among local pilots, a treacherous maze of rocky debris left over from some ancient cosmic collision. Is he attempting to navigate the Scylla drift? One of the alien officers gasped, all 3 of its jaws dropping in disbelief. Indeed he was. Derek shot into the asteroid field like a pinball launched by the hand of a caffeinated toddler. He bounced off one asteroid, narrowly avoided being crushed between 2 others, and at one point appeared to be playing chicken with a particularly large space rock. The aliens watched transfixed as Derek pinballed his way through the asteroid field. It was a display of piloting that defied all logic and several laws of physics. Each near miss elicited gasps from the crowd, each death-defying maneuver drawing reluctant murmurs of admiration. But Derek wasn't done yet. Oh no, merely surviving the asteroid field wasn't enough for our intrepid, insane hero. As he emerged from the other side of the Scylla drift, relatively unscathed save for a few new dents in his borrowed spacesuit, Derek set his sights on an even more ambitious target. The system's smaller sun, a red dwarf star, was entering a period of increased solar activity. Massive solar flares erupted from its surface, each one capable of frying every electronic system within a 1,000,000-mile radius. "He wouldn't," one of the alien officers whispered, its eye stalks quivering in disbelief. "He couldn't," another added, mandibles clicking nervously. "He shouldn't," a third chimed in, tentacles wrapping around itself in anxiety. "But he did." Oddly enough, Derek, in a move that would have made even the most reckless of daredevils question their life choices, aimed himself straight at the erupting star. He rocketed towards it, his suit system screaming warnings that were promptly ignored. As he approached the star, Derek activated the suit's magnetic boots, a feature normally used for walking on the hulls of spacecraft during repairs. But our dear Derek had a different idea in mind. Using the star's powerful magnetic field, Derek essentially surfed along the edge of a solar flare. His suit glowed white-hot, the protection systems working overtime to prevent him from being turned into a particularly crispy human nugget. The aliens back at the bar watched in slack-jawed amazement as Derek rode the solar flare like some cosmic cowboy, whooping and hollering all the way. The fact that no one could actually hear him in the vacuum of space did little to dampen the effect of his performance. For 3 heart-stopping minutes, Derek danced on the edge of annihilation, his tiny suited figure silhouetted against the awesome power of a star in turmoil. It was beautiful, terrifying, and monumentally stupid all at once, in other words, quintessentially human. But finally, just as it seemed certain that Derek's luck had run out and he was about to be swallowed by the star, he activated his suit's emergency teleport beacon. In a flash of light that was almost lost against the backdrop of the solar eruption, Derek vanished. A moment later, he rematerialized in the bar's airlock, stumbling out in his scorched and battered spacesuit. The faceplate was cracked, wisps of smoke were emanating from every joint, and the whole thing smelled strongly of ozone and bad decisions. Derek removed his helmet, his face split by a grin that was equal parts triumph and "I can't believe that actually worked." His hair was standing on end, whether from static electricity or sheer terror was anyone's guess. "So," he said, his voice hoarse but jubilant, impressed yet. The bar erupted in a cacophony of alien cheers, a sound that defied description but could best be likened to a mixture of whale song, dubstep, and a burgeoning garbage disposal. The Federation officers, their composure finally and utterly shattered, could only stare in disbelief. The leader, its scales now cycling through colors faster than a quantum computer on steroids, floated over to Derek. For a long moment it regarded the singed human with a gaze that seemed to penetrate to the very core of Derek's being, which, let's be honest, probably didn't take very long. Finally it spoke, its voice a mixture of awe and resignation. "In all my cycles I have never witnessed such a display of reckless bravery and sheer, unadulterated madness. You, Derek of Earth, have indeed impressed us." Derek's grin, if possible, grew even wider. "So does this mean humans get to stay in this sector?" The alien leader's eye stalks drooped in what might have been the extraterrestrial equivalent of a long-suffering sigh. "Yes, human, you and your kind may remain. The treaties will be adjusted." A cheer went up from the handful of other humans in the bar, who had been watching the proceedings with a mixture of pride and second-hand embarrassment. Derek, basking in his moment of glory, turned to address his new adoring public. "Drinks for everyone," he declared magnanimously, conveniently forgetting that he had left his wallet in his other, less charred pair of pants. "And remember, folks, when life gives you lemons, sometimes you've just got to strap those lemons to a rocket and shoot him into a star." As the bar erupted into celebration, with humans and aliens alike toasting Derek's insane feat, the Federation officers huddled together in their booth, looking shell-shocked. "Did we just?" one began. "Witness a primitive Deathworlder surf a solar flare for the sake of a bar bet," another finished. Yes, we did. We did. The Galactic Council is never going to believe this," a third moaned, its tentacles drooping dejectedly. And meanwhile, Derek had been hoisted onto the shoulders of a particularly enthusiastic group of Rigelians, no mean feat considering they were gelatinous cubes with a tendency to engulf rather than lift. As he was paraded around the bar, basking in his newfound fame, he caught sight of his reflection in a polished bulkhead. His lucky shirt was in tatters, his hair looked like it had been styled by a mad scientist with a Tesla coil, and he had a burn on his left cheek in the distinct shape of Saturn. All in all, he decided, it was a good look for him. As the night wore on and the celebration showed no sign of abating, word of Derek's feat began to spread. Faster-than-light communications buzzed with the news, each retelling more exaggerated than the last. By the time the story reached the far edges of the galaxy, Derek had become a titan who wrestled stars with his bare hands and used black holes as bowling balls. In the days and weeks that followed, the repercussions of Derek's hold my beer moment reverberated throughout the galaxy. Humans, once viewed as barely tolerated deathworlders, found themselves the subject of intense fascination. Alien science teams clamored to study the peculiar biology that allowed humans to survive such extreme conditions. Xenoanthropologists debated endlessly about the evolutionary pressures that could produce a species seemingly hardwired for self-destruction yet gifted with an almost supernatural ability to survive. The Galactic Federation, for its part, was thrown into chaos. Emergency sessions were called, treaties were hastily rewritten, and more than one career politician found themselves suddenly retired to a nice, quiet moon on the outer rim. The general consensus was that if they couldn't keep humans out, they might as well try to keep them contained. This, of course, was a spectacular failure. Humans, emboldened by Derek's success and fueled by an insatiable curiosity about their new galactic neighbors, began venturing out en masse. They popped up in the most unlikely places, asking questions that no sane being would ever think to ask, and generally causing the kind of chaos that only a species with a self-preservation instinct seemingly stuck in reverse could manage. Derek, for his part, found himself thrust into the role of reluctant ambassador. His face, complete with its Saturn-shaped burn scar, was plastered across holoscreens galaxy-wide. Talk show hosts clamored for interviews, each one hoping to be the one to finally unravel the mystery of human insanity. So Derek, a particularly pompous Venetian talk show host, asked during one such interview, its gelatinous form quivering with barely contained excitement, what compelled you to attempt such a foolhardy feat? Derek, who had been picking at a hole in the arm of his chair, much to the horror of the show's producer, looked up with a grin. Well, bloopy. It's bloop-ix, the host corrected, its translucent skin flushing a deep indigo. Right, Bluey, Derek nodded, completely missing the host's look of resignation. Anyway, why'd I do it? Simple. Someone said I couldn't. And let me tell you, nothing gets a human going quite like someone saying you can't do that. The host's eye stalks quivered in confusion, but the risk of death was astronomical. Surely no sane being would. Derek cut him off with a laugh. Sanity's overrated, my gelatinous friend. Sometimes you've just got to look death in the eye and say, not today, buddy. I've got a bet to win and a beer to finish. As Derek's unique brand of wisdom spread across the galaxy, a curious thing began to happen. Other species, long set in their cautious, rational ways, began to experiment. Reports started trickling in from across the cosmos. A group of Arcturians, normally known for their strict adherence to safety protocols, were caught trying to skateboard down the rings of a gas giant. A Zorbaxian chef made headlines by creating a dish so spicy it technically qualified as a chemical weapon in 3 sectors. The Galactic Federation watched these developments with growing alarm. It seemed that humanity's particular breed of madness was contagious, spreading through the galaxy like a particularly chaotic virus. Nowhere was this more evident than in the sudden popularity of Earth's cultural exports. Human entertainment, once dismissed as crude and simplistic, was now all the rage. Alien teens drove their parents to distraction with their obsession with Earth music, fashion, and slang. The biggest hit was a reality show called Extreme Xeno Sports, where beings from across the galaxy attempted to outdo each other in acts of increasingly ludicrous daring-do. The show's tagline, "Hold my Newtonian fluid and watch this," became a popular catchphrase, much to the chagrin of parents and safety officials everywhere. Derek, naturally, was a frequent guest star. His segments, which usually involved him attempting stunts that made his solar flare surfing look tame by comparison, were always the highest rated. The fact that he seemed to escape each death-defying feat with nothing more than a new scar and a great story only added to his mystique. But it wasn't all fun and games. As humanity's influence spread, so too did concerns about the long-term implications of their chaotic presence in galactic society. The Galactic Council of Elders, a group of long-lived beings who prided themselves on their careful, measured approach to cosmic governance, called an emergency session. The chambers, normally a place of quiet contemplation and painfully slow decision-making, were abuzz with agitated murmurs. Order, order, the High Elder, a being so ancient that it resembled nothing so much as a sentient dust cloud, wheezed. We are gathered here today to address the human problem. A chorus of agreement rippled through the chamber. Beings of all shapes and sizes nodded their heads or equivalent appendages, their usual stoic demeanor cracked by genuine concern. To these humans, another elder spoke up, its voice like the creaking of ancient trees. They disrupt the very fabric of our society. Their reckless behavior, their complete disregard for established norms, it cannot be allowed to continue. Murmurs of assent filled the chamber. The High Elder raised a tendril for silence. And yet, it continued, its voice carrying the weight of eons. We cannot deny the vitality they have brought to our galaxy. When was the last time any of us felt truly alive, truly challenged? Uncomfortable silence fell over the assembly. Many of the elders shifted awkwardly, suddenly very interested in examining the floor, ceiling, or their own appendages. Perhaps the High Elder mused, a hint of something that might have been amusement coloring its dusty voice. What we need is not to contain humanity, but to learn from them, to rediscover our own capacity for wonder, for adventure, for living, rather than merely existing. The chamber erupted into chaos. Elders argued back and forth, their usual decorum forgotten in the face of such a radical proposal. Some were vehemently opposed, claiming that adopting human behaviors would lead to the collapse of galactic civilization. Others, a growing minority, seemed intrigued by the idea. As the debate raged on, a junior aide rushed into the chamber, looking flustered. It whispered urgently to the High Elder, whose dusty form seemed to pulse with surprise. Silence. The High Elder called out, its voice carrying an uncharacteristic note of urgency. We have a situation. The chamber fell quiet. All eyes or sensory organs turned expectantly towards their leader. It seems the High Elder began, its voice a mixture of disbelief and what might have been grudging admiration that a group of humans has. Well, they've apparently decided to attempt to race starships through the void cascade. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The void cascade was a treacherous region of space, a maze of quantum filaments and temporal eddies that even the most advanced nav computers couldn't reliably map. It was widely regarded as a galactic no-go zone, a place where ships entered but never returned. That's not the worst of it, the High Elder continued, its dusty form flickering with agitation. They're broadcasting it, live, across all frequencies. They're calling it the Kessel Run or some such nonsense. For a moment, stunned silence reigned. Then, almost as one, the assembled elders rose from their seats and began filing out of the chamber. Where are you going? The High Elder demanded, its dusty form swirling in confusion. We haven't finished our deliberations. One of the elders paused at the door, a gleam in its eye that hadn't been there in millennia. With all due respect, High Elder, it said, its voice trembling with an emotion long forgotten. Deliberations can wait. This we have to see. And so, in a turn of events that would have been unthinkable mere months ago, the most august body in the galaxy adjourned their solemn meeting to crowd around view screens and watch a bunch of crazy humans attempt the impossible. As the first ships entered the void cascade, alarms blaring and pilots whooping with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, the High Elder found itself floating at the back of the crowd. It watched as its fellow elders cheered and gasped, their usual stoic demeanor forgotten in the excitement of the moment. Well, it mused to itself, a ripple of amusement passing through its dusty form. It seems the humans might have a point after all. Perhaps a little chaos is exactly what this galaxy needed. Meanwhile, back at the rusty airlock, Derek sat at the bar, nursing a drink that was probably illegal in at least 12 systems. He watched the race on the bar's holoprojector, a proud grin on his face. That's humanity for you, he said to no one in particular, raising his glass in a toast. Give us an impossible task, tell us it can't be done, and we'll not only do it, we'll turn it into the galaxy's hottest new sport. The bartender, who had long since given up trying to understand humans, simply nodded and slid Derek another drink. As the first ship emerged from the void cascade, battered but triumphant, the bar erupted into cheers. Derek leaned back, a satisfied smile on his face. It had been a wild few months since his little stunt, but he wouldn't have it any other way. The galaxy was changing, becoming a bit more human, which is to say, a bit more chaotic, a bit more adventurous, and a whole lot more fun. You know, Derek mused, addressing his drink, which alarmingly seemed to be addressing him back. I think this might be the start of a beautiful friendship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. He paused, considering his words, then added with a chuckle, or at least, it'll be one hell of a ride finding out. As if in agreement, his drink burped, sending up a small mushroom cloud of neon-colored smoke. Derek laughed, raised his glass to the starry sky visible through the bar's viewport, and took a long swig. The galaxy would never be the same again. And honestly, that was probably for the best. After all, as any human could tell you, the most interesting stories always begin with someone saying, "Hold my beer and watch this."